Hi, and welcome to episode 3 of the Shaped Marketer podcast. This episode is all about project management. I'm going to be reading from a content piece I wrote called Project Management Superhero Monopoly, which is essentially 30 key project management topics, one for each space on the Monopoly game board. As you will see if you read it on theshapemarketer.com or my Substack, I used visuals from my original artwork, Superhero Monopoly. The tagline for the content piece then became Comic Book Superheroes Explain What It Takes to Run a Project Across the Board. Board is a fun play on words for board game and, say, the board of a company. All right, well, let's get going here. Here's 30 key project management topics. Topic number 1, projects, programs, and portfolios. These are just different systems intended to deliver value for organizations, value in the form of new products, services, or results that meet the needs of customers or end users. The Project Management Institute defines a project as a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product or service or result. Projects have a beginning and an end to the project work or a phase of the project work. Projects can stand alone or be a part of a program or portfolio. So then a program is related projects or other subsidiary programs and program activities that are managed in a coordinated manner to obtain benefits not available for managing them individually. And finally, a portfolio are projects, programs, subsidiary portfolios, and operations managed as a group to achieve strategic objectives. So although they're distinct from each other, like in the way they have different scopes, planning, monitoring, and what success looks like, they all do roll up to support the strategic objectives of the organization. Topic 2, project lifecycle. Projects come in many shapes and sizes, and there's a variety of ways to undertake them. When a project's deliverable has uncertain requirements and complexity, project teams can opt to explore the requirements using iterative or incremental project life cycles to adapt to changes more easily and avoid the risk of wasted work, rework, and having to change approaches, which is costly and time-consuming. Iterative and incremental life cycles help project teams get feedback quickly and verify their work to understand the true customer requirements. This can likely be done faster and more accurately than with heavily planned static documentation from a predictive life cycle. And this is not to poo-poo on predictive or waterfall approach. When a project is well-defined, you know what the scope is, what the schedule and the cost is, the project team can heavily plan up front and reduce uncertainty as the project moves forward. A predictive approach can work quite nicely. It just depends on the project. And especially if you have templates or documentation from previous or similar projects, then a predictive or waterfall lifecycle can work quite well. Topic 3, project management. Project Management Institute defines project management as the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet project requirements. Project management refers to guiding the project work to deliver the intended outcomes. I really like this definition because the folks that do project management are practitioners. And as previously mentioned, projects come in many different shapes and sizes and must be approached differently. So to do project management effectively, you know that there is an art and a science to it. Here are the 12 project management principles that are printed in the PMBOK, which is a legendary resource that's consistently updated by the Project Management Institute. Here are the 12 project management principles. Change, stewardship, team, stakeholders, focus on value, systems thinking, leadership, tailoring, quality, complexity, risk, and adaptability. And you'll see these principles come up throughout these 30 key project management topics. All right, topic number 4, project manager. Defined in the PMBOK, a project manager is the person assigned by the performing organization to lead the project team that is responsible for achieving the project objectives. So, using this definition, who is ultimately responsible for the project? Is it the project manager or the project team? Taking stakeholders and project team definitions into account, I'd argue that the project manager is a part of the project team, and everyone on the project team is responsible for the project success. It probably depends on the organization and how much authority is given to the project manager. It's common for the project manager to not have actually any direct reports and thus have no real authority over the folks involved in the project. That's part of the challenge of the role. However, this can be seen as an opportunity, especially if the organization supports the notion the project manager can be positioned as impartial. They are trying to get the best work out of the project team, as well as bridging the expectations from leadership to achieve the project objectives. Topic 5, project methodologies. Projects have many characteristics, but in general, project work tends to range from definable work to high uncertainty work. A predictive or waterfall methodology tends to work well with definable work, while an adaptive or agile methodology tends to work with high uncertainty work. And then hybrid is kind of a third common methodology where a combination of approaches are used. So here's a little bit more detail of these 3 types. With predictive methodology, the plan drives the work. As much planning as possible is done up front. Project requirements are identified as much as possible. Project teams take advantage of the high certainty and often execute project activities in a serial or sequential manner. With Agile methodology, the team plans and replans as more important information becomes available from review or of frequent deliveries. In an Agile environment, there is an expectation that requirements will change. And this is unlike predictive, where the team will try to limit change as much as possible. Agile combines both iterative and incremental approaches to adapt to high degrees of change. And then with hybrid methodology, any combination of approaches can be used. For example, a project might utilize Agile methodology during the development portion of the project due to uncertainty, complexity, or risk. The project might shift to a predictive methodology for the rollout phase of the deliverable, which might be handled by a different team. So the goal of project management is to produce value in the best possible way given the current environment. It doesn't matter if that is agile or predictive. The question to ask is always, how can we be most successful? Topic 6, the project management triangle, which is also known as the iron triangle, the golden triangle, the project triangle, and the triple constraint. It's a model. It proposes that 3 constraints are always present on a project: cost or budget, scope, and time of the schedule. Each are interconnected and must continually be balanced. When a change is made to one constraint, a change is necessary into the others to compensate, or the quality of the project will suffer. For example, increasing scope likely means increasing time and cost, or a tight budget likely means increased costs and reducing scope. The project management discipline empowers project managers and project teams with tools and techniques to organize their work to meet these constraints. If you need to finish a project in a shorter time, you can throw more people at the problem, but this will obviously raise the cost. Unless finishing the task quicker somehow alleviates cost elsewhere in the project by some equal amount. This is where lean and agile methodologies really shine. Topic 7, project stakeholders. Project stakeholder is anyone involved in or affected by the project. And that potentially seems like a lot of people. And yes, the PMBOK defines stakeholders as an individual, group, or organization that may be affected by, or perceive itself to be affected by a decision, activity, or outcome of a project, program, or portfolio. The project manager will strive to have a productive working relationship with all stakeholders throughout the project. And depending on the characteristic of the project and the environment, this alone can be a challenge. It could be 5 people, it could be 50 people, it could be a 500 super complex project and with 500 stakeholders. To keep track, the project manager will likely run a stakeholder analysis to determine the interest that should be taken into account and when. And to add complexity, there may be different stakeholders at different phases of a project, and their power, influence, and interest may change as the project unfolds. What does working and collaborating with stakeholders look like? Well, the project manager will work with them to introduce the project, extract requirements, manage expectations, resolve issues, negotiate, prioritize, problem solve, and facilitate decisions. This calls on the application of soft skills such as active listening, interpersonal, leadership, and conflict management. Topic 8, project deliverable. The PMBOK defines a project deliverable as any unique and verifiable product, result, or capability to perform a service that is required to be produced to complete a process, phase, or project. Value and quality are both important to a deliverable. The deliverable is intended to produce value, which is the worth, importance, or usefulness of something. Different stakeholders perceive value in different ways. A customer may define value as their ability to use a feature or having the product function a certain way. Organizations focus on business value through financial metrics. And society might see value in different ways, such as how groups, communities, or the environment is affected by a project deliverable. Since value is the ultimate indicator of project success, project teams might shift focus away from simply creating a specific deliverable and instead focus on the intended outcomes that are more in line with the vision and purpose of the project. It's important for organizational leaders to support the project teams and other stakeholders' understanding of both the deliverable and the intended outcome from the deliverable. Quality is another related key term. Quality ensures that the deliverables meet acceptance criteria. Quality has several dimensions, which might include how the deliverable is performing. There's conformity, reliability, resilience, satisfaction, uniformity, efficiency, and sustainability. All those things are factoring into quality and the acceptance of the deliverable. Topic 9, project team. If stakeholders are anyone involved in or affected by a project, the project team is a specific group of stakeholders that are central to the project. The PMBOK defines a project team as a set of individuals performing the work of the project to achieve its objectives. The project team produces deliverables which add value to the organization and end user. And in this way, the project team needs clear direction from customers and end users regarding project requirements, outcomes, and expectations. The team can gain an understanding of these through the project plans, or the team can learn as they go from feedback loops, which are the primary feature of an adaptive or agile approach, for example. The role of the project manager helps facilitate the team's understanding of the project and the work to be done, as well as establishing the culture and environment that enables a high-performing team. Teams can even produce a team charter, either deliberately or informally, and the project charter will detail operating guidelines and other team norms. This is a common thing in agile working environments. A team charter is representative of the team's culture. It operates within the organization's culture, but reflects the team's way of working and how they will interact. Topic 10, here's more about the project charter. The project team produces the deliverable, which ultimately adds value to the organization and end user. If the project charter outlines the business need and intended value, it can serve as an authorizing document, which effectively states the organization is moving forward with the project. With the project charter offering details about the goals and objectives of the project, along with a clear statement of the business need, it helps the project team understand what they are working towards. And armed with this information, the project team can better identify opportunities and risks, increasing the likelihood of a positive project outcome. A project manager uses the project charter document as approval to form a project team to achieve the outcomes. In this early startup phase, a high level roadmap is developed, initial funding requirements are established, the project team and resources and requirements are defined, and milestones are created. Topic 11, project planning. Who participates in planning? Well, stakeholders participate in and shape planning. Well, what is planning? Planning organizes, elaborates, and coordinates project work throughout the project. Time spent planning should be appropriate for the project. If scope and requirements are well understood, upfront planning, along with the predictive or waterfall approach, is likely. If scope and requirements are not well understood, planning might be minimal upfront and done for each project development cycle. If the latter, and certainly in the case of an innovative deliverable, the project team is highly involved with the planning for each iteration of the work. So it's often the case that project deliverables necessitate the type of planning necessary. For example, a construction project requires significant upfront planning to consider materials, logistics, and delivery. Product development or software development, particularly high-tech products, may use continuous and adaptive planning to allow for stakeholder feedback. Regardless of the type of planning done, planning usually calls on a lot of estimating. You're going to be estimating work effort, duration, costs, people, and physical resources. All these are estimated. And as the project moves forward, the estimates may change. Topic 12, project budget. The PMBOK defines project budget as the approved estimate for the project or any work breakdown structure component or any schedule activity. Basically, it's the cost of all the units of work that you have planned for in the project scope. And as with scope, the budget is estimated. Estimates are inherently uncertain and associated with risk. And like scope, the budget will likely evolve from the initial agreed upon estimates. How is budget estimated? Looking at the estimated scope, project activities get an estimated cost. These costs are aggregated to develop the cost baseline, and this cost baseline is then allocated across the project schedule to reflect when the costs are incurred. This is usually managed by the project manager. If there is a sudden change to the budget for a period of time, the work will likely need to be rescheduled. A project budget will likely include contingency reserve funds in the case of an adverse event. Ultimately, the project budget is the cost baseline plus the contingency reserve. Topic 13, project scope. The PMBOK defines scope as the work performed to deliver a product, service, or result with the specified features and functions. Project scope entails what needs to be produced. The work, the deliverable, and the requirements. Sometimes requirements are not clear, and in this case, the scope cannot be fully planned for and might have to be evolved over time in the course of projects. And as mentioned, when the scope is unclear or complex, an adaptive or agile approach might be useful for the project work. If requirements are clear, the scope can be fully planned and a more predictive or waterfall approach should work. Scope is one of the three project constraints along with budget and schedule. Together, they are called the triple constraint, as previously mentioned. If there is a change in any one of the three at any point, the other two will be affected. How is scope decided on, and how might it change during the course of a project? Well, stakeholders. They define and prioritize requirements and scope for the project team. If there is a decision to change the scope after the project is underway, the budget and schedule will have to be adjusted somehow. If scope continually expands, this is the scenario commonly called scope creep. Regardless, scope is planned early on and is likely the precursor to setting the schedule, which includes project activities with durations, dependencies, and sequences. Topic 14, project schedule. A project schedule is a model that plans how a project's activities will be executed, taking into account durations and dependencies. Along with scope and budget, it is one of the triple constraints. All three are usually developed in a similar fashion in the planning stages of a project through estimating and coming to a consensus or baseline. Planning the schedule can use predictive or adaptive approaches. In a predictive environment, the scope is broken down into specific project activities, which are then sequenced, and then it's estimated how long the team will take to complete the activities. If at any point the project is behind schedule or the schedule needs to change, more resources may need to be added, which affects the budget. In an adaptive environment, the scope is also broken down, but usually not as much. Sprints and iterations are planned, aimed at delivering quickly and getting feedback before more work is planned and scheduled. The project team can more easily adapt to changes, which theoretically lowers the risk of affecting the budget. Topic 15, project baselining. Project baselining is the process of developing baselines for each of the triple constraints of budget, scope, and schedule. A baseline is effectively the approved version of each, representing a consensus of the estimates that are embedded in each. Baselines are developed in the planning phase of a project and will be continuously useful as the project progresses to evaluate variance of actual performance. If there is a change in the project that affects any of the triple constraints, the project team will have to adapt. Depending on the complexity of the project and how it is being managed, this process might be reprioritizing the backlog or rebaselining the project. Suffice to say, baselines are set in the planning stage, but are continuously revisited and potentially updated over the course of a project. Topic 16, project milestone. When integrated into the project schedule, milestones can have planned dates, and this is helpful to gauge performance against the plan as the project progresses. By signifying project work and performance with milestones, it allows the project team to focus and get a sense of momentum and progress. If managed well, project milestones can be something the entire project team or even the organization can really rally behind. Milestones depend on the type of project. Construction projects, for example, will have different milestones compared to software development projects. Project approval, requirements gathering, planning, hiring, resource allocation, training, testing, stakeholder sign-offs, and deployment are all types of milestones. Topic 17, project dependencies. Project dependencies are relationships between tasks where a task has to be completed or started before another task can begin. Dependencies are key elements of the overall project schedule, along with dates, milestones, and durations. Mapping dependencies will help the project team complete tasks in the correct sequence. And there are 4 types of dependency relationships. Mandatory, where it is contractually or inherently required for a task to start or be completed before another can begin. There's discretionary, where it is best practice or preferential of the team to start or complete a task before another can begin. There's external relationships, where project activities are related to non-project activities out of the team's control. And there's an internal relationship where all project activities are under the team's control. Project dependencies are likely identified in the project's planning phase, but will be continuously managed if there is a change to the project, particularly if one or more of the triple constraints are affected. Topic 18, project resources. Project resources refer to the actual people doing the project work, managing the project, advising, or assisting. This includes knowledge and skill sets, as well as the budget and time necessary to complete tasks. Physical resources are all the non-human resources needed, such as goods, materials, equipment, software, and licenses. Developed in the planning stages of the project, a resource management plan should describe how project resources are acquired, allocated, monitored, and controlled. Additional planning for physical resources might require lead time, delivery, storage, inventory, and other logistics. Environmental sustainability and the organization's use of materials and natural resources are more considerations to have. Like scope, schedule, and budget, resources are estimated during planning and then continuously managed throughout the project. Any adverse event, risk, or change to a project will affect the triple constraint, and those resources will have to be adjusted. For example, if a project needs to be delivered sooner, additional resources are needed to meet that delivery. If the project's budget is suddenly cut, resources may be cut or positioned differently. There is always an implicit or deliberate intention to minimize the waste of resources and maximize the value of the project deliverable. Topic 19, project risk. The PMBOK defines risk as an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, can have a positive or negative effect on one or more of the objectives. Notice that risk is not only negative, such as threats, risk can also be positive, such as opportunities. Like scope, schedule, budget, resources, and other project elements, risk is estimated or anticipated in the planning stages of a project and then continuously addressed throughout the project. Embedded in planning for risk is an organization's risk attitude, appetite, and threshold. These will influence how risk is addressed. Responses to risk should be appropriate for the significance of the risk, ideally cost-effective and realistic within the environment of the project, agreed upon by stakeholders, and owned by someone, perhaps a project manager or perhaps a centralized support team like a project management office or another governance body. Some projects may have risk around the deliverable meeting regulatory requirements. And in this case, a predictive approach may be useful to build in testing, documentation, processes, and procedures that aid in passing the requirements. If a project has risk around stakeholder acceptance, an iterative approach to the deliverable may be necessary to generate feedback before developing more features and functions of the deliverable. Ideally, project teams will maximize positive risk and decrease exposure to negative risk. Topic 20, project procurement. Like many other project processes, procurement can happen at any time during a project, but if planned for, can be performed smoothly. Project managers likely won't be the role that deals with negotiations, contracts, laws, or regulations that are necessary for procurement. However, they will work with the procurement experts, facilitate the process, integrate the procurement into the project work, and monitor performance. Procurement is one of the primary parts of a project that you develop a plan for, along with, you guessed it, scope, budget, schedule, team, resources, and risk. Topic 21, project communication. Communication is the process of exchanging information with someone. In the context of a project, determining how, when, how often, and under what circumstances stakeholders should be communicated with is important to plan for and execute. Project managers are skilled at identifying, analyzing, and prioritizing stakeholders to plan for how communication will flow throughout the project. They are constantly trying to understand what communications are sufficient to manage stakeholder expectations. Various tools and communication channels will be adopted to execute the communication plan. Depending on what the communication goal is, 3 types of communication can be considered. There's push communication, where information is sent one way, such as an email or a memo, status report, or a voicemail. You won't get immediate feedback or be able to gauge reaction or assess understanding of the information in this type of communication. Then there's pull communication, where a stakeholder can autonomously use an intranet or an internal repository or online search to find information. And then the third one is interactive communication. And this is where information is sent both ways, such as face-to-face interaction, meetings, chat, or phone conversations. And here engagement is deeper with this type. Topic 22, project ceremonies. A project ceremony is a term usually associated with adaptive or agile project management, but can certainly be considered for waterfall. Essentially, a ceremony is a time-bound activity that the project team undertakes to effectively communicate information that is necessary to plan, strategize, execute, perform, and learn from a project. Common ceremonies include a daily stand-up. This is where the team meets and micro-commits to each other to uncover problems and ensure work is flowing smoothly. A stand-up is usually time-boxed to no longer than about 15 minutes. It's a common practice to have each person say what they have completed since the last stand up, what they're planning to complete before now and the next stand up, and what, if any, barriers, risks, or problems that the rest